One of the most fun characters in all of Warhammer 40,000 is, funnily enough, a Necron. It is Trazyn the Infinite, an overlord for the Necrons and the self-proclaimed archaeovist of the Solemnus galleries. While everybody else is waging wars of expansion and conquest, Trazyn is over here putting shiny rocks into his pockets and collecting things for his museum. And going through my Necron collection, I happen to have him. First things first, I need to knock off a decade of dust. He is ancient both in the lore and in my collection. I managed to get a little kit bashing done back in the day, but for some reason I never got him finished. But today's the day. To start off, I need to finish the base. I mixed up some milliput and used this to shove underneath the scarabs. For my Necron dynasty, I have them on a sandy sulfur-ridden landscape, and to make this, I put a big wad under the base of the swarm to hide the old 25mm base that for some reason I didn't get rid of. Then I smoothed it out over the rest of the front. Then I grabbed some texture paste and smeared this all over the ground, doing 2 coats to get it properly situated all over. Now to clean up his war scythe. Technically, Trazyn carries a staff of light called the Empathic Obliterator, but a million years ago I decided to upgrade him to a war scythe I made out of a for sale sign and some airsoft BBs. Somehow it hasn't broken over all this time, so I must have done a good job, and I think I was on the right track. I took my rotary tool and a round sanding drum and I used this to carve in some dents into the scythe to give it that Necron techie look. I cleaned up the Dremel work with my hobby knife and I went back to a larger bit to hack away some more of the axe. Right now, the scythe has 2 balls. I think 3 would make it a proper collection. I started off making a dent with the point of my hobby knife, and then I used this pointed bit to cut a round hole that'll fit a round glass bead. Now it's 3 different balls that are getting smaller and smaller as they move towards the point of the weapon. I think he's looking good, so now I can give him his hopefully last coat of paint. My Necrons are white, but I always start off with a black prime. Then I blasted him with a base coat of gray and a dusting of light gray from above to start brightening him up. Then finally, a proper zenithal of white ink just from above. This takes care of almost all the white for me, so I have to do very little brushwork to get a clean, crisp white armor paint job. Now for the black parts of him. I took some Army Painter Grim Black, thinned it down a little, and put this over his robot cloak. And I put this over the scarab heads and feet. Whatever I used back in the day to cast these scarabs does not like speed paint, and it dried gunky and yucky. I'll have to use regular old acrylics for this. I started out with a glazing of black to clean up the speed paint problem, and I mixed up lighter and lighter shades of gray, highlighting all these little buggies. After a few rounds of brush on highlights, I switched to a dry brush for the brightest highlights. Now my little fellows are looking good, it's time to work on the man himself. I used some black wash to bring out the recesses in his armor, and while that was drying, I hit the last of the black parts of his staff with some more grim black. Now his armor is still a little dark, and the wash really dark in some spots, so I went with the white paint and I glazed this on top, doing many coats to build up the highlights around his shoulders, chest, and especially the hood of his cloak. Now the armor is mostly done, I hit the metal Necron glyphs with some copper paint, and I also put this onto the decorative tassels that are hanging between his legs. I thought that this was doing a good job of making him more regal, so I picked out some of the segments of his hood too. He's an overlord after all, he gets to have a little bit more fancy metal. Once that was on there, I took a dark red wash that once upon a time got splattered in blood for the blood god paint, and I used this to glaze and shade the metal. This is another speed paint, so it pools nice and dark in the recesses. My Necron color scheme is all about contrast between the white armor and the bright orangey red highlights. And to get these started, I dry brushed his cloak with the dark red, then some pure red, then some orangey yellow, and then finally some bright yellow. This catches in all the edges of the tiles that make up his cape and gives them a more high-tech look. Then for his stick, I put a gray paint over the top. Then I took a nice sharp brush and painted on little lines over the staff to make it look like it's actually segmented, doing a bunch of little lines of black, and then going over these spots again with small stripes of light gray. This will cheat the look that there's actual texture, even though it's really just a perfectly smooth popsicle stick. After that, I threw on some red ink in my airbrush and I carefully sprayed this over the glowing parts, all the eyeballs of the scarab swarms, and all over the balls of his scythe closest to Trazyn. This color spilling onto the model will get that powerful look, and I went back to the base coat for all the Necron balls with some dark red paint. I mixed black into this color and I painted this towards the center of the scythe. Then I put yellow all along the outer edge. I make my Necron combat weapons look molten, so now I need a gradient between the almost black red and the bright yellow, and I glazed a stripe of orange down the middle. This is pretty tricky to do, it takes a lot of layers, back and forth, more yellow than more red until the boundary disappears between the color. And while I was painting the flat of the blade, I also did the same thing to the balls. I edge highlighted the outside of the staff with a light yellow, and after a few more rounds of glazing, the staff was looking pretty good. Not bad for some garbage glued together. Now I can take these same colors that I mixed up for the staff and I put them onto the eyes of my scarabs, doing a dot of red, then a smaller dot of orangey red, and then a tiny little dot of yellow right in the center of each eye. And speaking of eyes, Trazyn's eyes got this red too. He's almost done for the second time. I smeared tan paint all over the ground to base coat the sand, and I dry brushed the sand with some white paint to bring out the texture. This was step 1 of my orangey sulfur landscape. The real secret is red pigment powder. I made up a slurry of this, mixing it with water and a drop of flow improver, and I put this all over the base. It pools in the recesses, letting a little of that tan and white poke through. And on those pokey spots, I sprayed these with a burst of Indian yellow ink, one of the most vibrant colors I have ever discovered. Now Trazyn is finally looking his best, and I can give the base rim a coat of gray to match the rest of my army. 10 years in my pile of shame, but Trazyn the Infinite is now complete. And I'm assuming that he's gonna get a new model one of these days because his buddy Oricon got one. So there's probably a plastic refresh right around the corner, but I'm glad that I got the old Finecast model. It really fits in with his rules because he might be the worst character in all of 40k. Definitely the worst Necron character. His data sheet is nothing to write home about. He's got a staff that'll on average in close combat kill a Space Marine like 50% of the time, and no shooting profile to speak of, so it's gotta come down to his special abilities. And his special abilities, well, they're really special. He grants sticky objectives to the squad he's attached to. That's a little something. And his other rule, Surrogate Host, is positively bizarre. In my command phase, I can pick another Necron infantry character and replace it with Trazyn, killing that other model. Is it worth it to lose like 50 to 85 points in my army just to move Trazyn around the board a little bit? No, it's not really worth it, but it is a really funky rule. It would be something if when Trazyn died, I could then elect to replace another model for my army with him, but no, it's in my command phase, so he's still alive and that other model is still alive. I have the option to choose to kill that other model. Now, if the rule was replace a warrior, Lichguard, or immortal model with Trazyn, there's a little something to that, because Trazyn isn't good, but he's better than a warrior. So that, I would actually do that for the meme, but killing like another Necron Overlord or a Royal Warden, yeah, that's not gonna happen just to move Trazyn a little bit. Trazyn's rules are pretty bad, but that's okay because I'm just gonna use them as a really cool proxy for a generic Necron Overlord. Trazyn is one of the most fun characters in all of 40k. He is the Collector, and Trazyn's Menagerie is one of the coolest pieces of Necron lore, one that I've always wanted to see realized. For January, we here at EonsOfBattle have turned that dream into a reality with the Tomb Library, a collection of grim alien technology to create some terrain that was all the rage 60 million years ago, with a powerful parapet for my machines to loom over while the grim faces stare down at my enemies, and a selection of high-tech sarcophagus perfect for my robots to take position on top of or behind of, or maybe something a little more grim dark. All this terrain will be available from EonsOfBattle.com as of now, January, starting this year off on the right side of the tomb. And I've got some big plans for some of these sarcophaguses a little later on, but first, I gotta get them painted up. I want this terrain to match my Necron army, so that means giving it the same white armor treatment, but on a much bigger scale. I broke out the primer and loaded up everything with a black prime. Then I hit them with the same treatment of Trazyn's armor, some mid-tone gray, a little lighter gray, and then some puffs of white mixed with just a little bit of gray to keep it a little dark. It's a lot of airbrushing, but with these big pieces and some strong texture, these layers will work together to build up the volumes. These pieces were printed in resin and turned out perfectly, thanks to the awesome printer and today's sponsor, Uniformation and the Uniformation GK3 Ultra. It is a 16K resolution resin printer that is big, perfect for us and our love of terrain and getting a lot of projects done in a timely fashion. This printer has a great big print volume, which allows us to print out all of these big chunky pieces in 2 build plates, and the print quality was perfect. The flip-up cover the printer has is an incredible quality of life improvement, so you don't have to find a place to set down the big top covers that other printers have. And it has a heating system, which makes sure that the resin is at the perfect temperature to reduce the chances of failure. We have been printing a ton on this printer, all of this month's and last month's terrain and other projects in between, and we have had no failures at all. The Uniformation GK3 Ultra's automatic feeding system tops off the vat when the resin is running low for those really long prints. In our use, this printer has been an absolute treat. If you're interested in this printer or the other printers and accessories Uniformation has to offer, use the link in the description below to check them out today. With the white on, I want to give it some more texture. I started off with the dry brushing of pure white. This hits on all the high points and makes everything look crisp and clean, catching on all the raised texture. Now that it's clean, I want it to look a little bit worn. It has been 60 million years after all. I sponged on more white paint to make the surface look dinged and weathered. It took a little bit, but it's all working together to match the complexion that the rest of my army has. Now to pick out some of the details. On the accent of the big robot faces, I painted a stripe of copper, and I put this over the pipes of the sarcophagus and the little techno doodads that are all over the walls. Then for the black parts, I also painted these with speed paint. I like speed paint for terrain because of the flowiness. I can load up a nice big brush and in one coat spread it on and get some good amount of contrast. I put this over the top of the walls and the exhaust ports along the sides. This was especially handy for quickly hitting the trim on all the smaller pillars on the little boxes. I hit these black parts with a little dusting of gray dry brushing, and now the armor is done. But it's looking dead. It needs the Necron power running through its veins. I started out airbrushing white over all the balls and the energy fields that are lifting up these pieces, and I went over these same spots with some red ink. This goes on incredibly vibrantly over the white, and I let it spill onto the surrounding armor like these pieces are glowing incredibly brightly. After the red, I hit the middle of each ball with some yellow paint, holding my airbrush close and trying to lay down a perfect little puff in the center of each ball. and making the top of the crystals really stand out. And speaking of stand out, I went back to white paint. I sprayed a tiny little puff of this on the top of the biggest spots that'll be the brightest, hottest parts of these details. I used a dry brush to hit the texture of the big old crystals, and I took a white paint onto a brush and I put a drop right in the center of each ball for the specular highlight. Now it's almost done, just a little bit more warmth. Yellow contrast paint sprayed over all these layers to blend them together and make these glowing glittery power balls as bright and saturated as I can possibly make them. I also hosed the bottom energy effects with this color so it pooled in all the nooks and crannies. All in all, pretty simple and quick paint job. The flat section of the sarcophaguses are perfect for some models to stand on, but also are the perfect spot for some of Trazyn's souvenirs, in the form of guys he has taken prisoner. Alrighty, I'm really making the airbrush work today. My Necron dynasty in the white and orange and black. I really like this color scheme. This Necron terrain has emerged from its 60 million year slumber and is now stalking the landscape, but this particular terrain is under the command of Trazyn. And you know, he's probably picking up a couple of trophies along the way. I went through my collection and found some old minis that would make a fine addition to Trazyn's collection. I started out mixing up some milliput and I spread this over the ground on the inside of the obelisk. Trazyn isn't just a collector, he's a historian. And if he found a speech suitably impressive or a battlefield victory worthy of note, he might just go ahead and grab the whole moment for his museum. I spread some texture paste over the putty and then stuck on some small rocks and a sprinkling of some more sand. Then I stuck down my ultramarine. I don't know what this guy did, but it must have been awesome. With the model down, I covered the ground in some thinned down brown paint, and then while the paint was still damp, I spread on some brown pigment powder using the airbrush to blow away the excess. Then I stuck down a few grass tufts with super glue, and this little exhibit is ready to show off. Now onto the big piece. This could have been a whole scene, maybe some Skitarii who, if they had not been snatched up by Trazyn, would have undoubtedly turned the tide of a whole campaign. Now they'll stand permanently in his collection. I ripped the models off the base and then glued them down to some 1/2 inch cork to give this diorama some height. I used milliput to fill in the surrounding area, making enough room for the two models to stand. Then I used wood glue and a sprinkle of sand to add some texture. I laid down some purple through the airbrush to color the ground and a sponging of a brighter purple for some contrast. Then I loaded up my little robot men's feet with plenty of super glue and stuck them down. After a few grass tufts of purple alien grass, the scene is complete. Now, onto the finale. I have this iron warrior that Trazyn has taken a liking to. I spread some more milliput onto the ground and covered it in texture paste. This marine is stalking through a battlefield, so I went and grabbed this EOB basing bit, available at EonsOfBattle.com. I stuck it into the soft putty and then put down more texture paste to blend it in. I base coated the earth with some green paint, then the sandbags with tan, and some gunmetal paint for the posts and barbed wire. I took a brown paint and glazed this over the ground and over the bottom half of the sandbags, then I hit it with a brown wash, and once that was dry, I sponged the metal with some silver paint. Then it was ready for me to glue down my little trader. I squished him down with lots of thick super glue and then stuck down some grass tufts that matched the color of the muddy ground. I thinned down a little brown mud texture paste and spread this in patches on the ground and up onto his feet like he's been marching. And like that, another fine piece for Trazyn's collection. These displays are gonna make a fine addition to my, or rather Trazyn's collection. Trazyn collecting things like Pokemon is one of the most fun aspects of Necron lore. In the book The Infinite and the Divine, there's a wonderful little tidbit where Trazyn is talking with one of his assistants, trying to figure out where something's gonna go, and his assistant helpfully offers, well, what if we move the wine cellar? And then Trazyn, the immortal being with godlike powers, responds, nonsense, then where would I put my wine? He can't drink wine. This collection of Necron terrain has got me really jazzed on my Necrons, and I kinda wanna see the whole dynasty together. My Necron army has come a long way. I remember when these guys were gunmetal and blue and I was painting them up in my mom's basement after school, and now it is this. Warrior heavy, destroyer heavy, now with actually a decent number of vehicles, especially these new Doomsday arcs, although I would like some annihilation barges and a couple of other things, but right now, the force is looking proper. I don't know exactly how many points in Necrons I have, but it is a lot. There's a few things I would like to add to it, like that new Amantar guy, the protogenitor of the Destroyer Curse. And speaking of Destroyers, I got Scorpek, I got Locust, I got Hexmark, but I don't have any Ophidians. I need at least a few Ophidians. And I really like the Destroyers. My Locust Destroyers are like my favorite thing in the Necrons, these weird Centaur guys. They really fill up a 60mm base well. I've only got 6 of them. I feel like I need more than 6. I've taken these guys in game. Not phenomenal, but definitely not bad. I was using them wrong before. Now I'm gonna use them right. I love my Necrons, my undead robot boys. The Necrons have already endgamed 40k. They've conquered the galaxy, they've killed their gods, they've reached immortality, and you know what? they discovered it's not all it's cracked up to be. Trazyn is looking pretty, and the Tomb Library is available at EonsOfBattle.com. Let me know in the comments below, what should I be adding to my Necron army? And oh, I'm pretty excited to work on my Necron army. Thanks for watching.